shown here at the museum. Of course, this summer, the museum opened in June, right as we celebrated the 33rd anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And we worked with Dialogue China, along with the June 4th Massacre Memorial Association, to host the temporary exhibit on Tiananmen in 1989 in the room next door that many of you have already seen, which of course is the largest exhibit ever put forth in the United States, and sadly the largest and only exhibit in the world after the exhibit in Hong Kong that we shut. Gao Zhisheng is a Chinese human rights attorney and dissident known for defending activists and religious minorities and documenting human rights abuses in China. Because of his work, he has been disbarred and detained by the Chinese government several times, and was arbitrarily detained, tortured, and has been missing since August 2017. We will continue to call on the Chinese government to unconditionally release all human rights lawyers who are detained, and call on the United States and other governments around the free world to do the same. We must stand for those who fight for freedom under communism. The unconditional release of these heroes for human rights in China is not only critical to the interests of the United States and the international community, but also to the people of China. I want to again thank you all for being here. I will hear about this incredible new display that we'll be hosting here at the museum. And I want to now welcome up to the podium Bob Fu, the founder and president of China Aid. Bob.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this very solemn event. Basically, we're going to hear directly from Ms. Gong He, wife of the missing Chinese human rights lawyer, Gao Zhisheng. I appreciate the effort from Ambassador Bernberg and his colleagues to co-host this event and organize this, and of course also the Tiananmen Memorial folks had put a lot of time and effort on this. Now, without really spending too much time, I just want to welcome Ms. Gong He to give us her remarks. I will translate for her. Let's welcome Gong He. Good afternoon, members of Congress and their friends. Good afternoon.
我是董和，非常感谢你们能见证14年来我们全家第一次团聚。我们全家团聚在了这幅高质浮雕艺术作品里。
I'm very thankful that today our family had our reunion under Mindy's portrait after 14 years.
我的先生高律师因为他坚守律师的职业道德及个人基本良知，被中共打压迫害近20年。2005年，中共关闭了他北京律师事务所，然后关注吊销他的律师执照，并以煽动颠覆国家安全罪判他3年缓期徒刑。
My husband, Gao Zhisheng, has been persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party for nearly 20 years just because he adheres to the professional ethics of the lawyer and his conscience. In 2005, the Chinese Communist Party forcibly closed his Beijing Zhisheng law firm and revoked his lawyer's license.
之后呢，他是经常的，不是软禁呢，就是关闭在北京武警路地下室里长达20个月，然后要不然就强制失踪，这种反复循环无穷尽的到现在，我们已经妻离子散14年。
After that, he was either arrested, locked up in a small confinement cell in prison, secretly detained in the basement of a Beijing armed police or placed under house arrest. Gao Zhisheng lost his personal freedom and his wife as well as his children separated for 14 years.
他在监狱期间呢，他在监狱3年期间呢，也是无尽的酷刑，各种酷刑去做小号。就是从监狱就是说释放回到了家里，是远离在了陕北的老家，仍然没有自由。然后就是也跟这个也不允许他看医生。然后就是说5年前吧，中共又再次非法绑架了他，到今天为止呢，已经是5年多。
He was incarcerated for 3 years in a black jail, black prison, and subject to countless tortures. Even if he was released from prison briefly, he was still under house arrest and had neither personal freedom nor access to a medical doctor. He was illegally kidnapped again 5 years ago. Since then, no one knows if he's dead or alive. Whereas there has been no news for the past 5 years.
因为我先生遭受迫害了，穿上我和孩子，所以2019年呢，我携孩子呢，就是被迫的逃离了中国，踏上孩子求学之路，也逃亡之路。我们经过云南、缅甸、泰国，然后赶紧到美国，至今已经有14年。
Because my husband was persecuted so severely, it implicated myself and my children. In 2009, I was forced to pick my daughter and my son and embarked on the road to escape out of China. It has been nearly 14 years. For 14 years, I never saw my husband, our kids, never saw their father, and no phone calls, no video, no audio from him.
尽管是在21世纪科技发展到我如此的今天，我们全家只有儿子2岁时的全家福，只有这样的。我相信在座的每一位人，你们都有智能的手机，你们手机里面都存有无数心爱的人的照片，无论你们在家里、办公室或者你们当中，甚至世界的任何地方，你们都可以想翻看的时候就能看到家人、父母、孩子的照片。但这种温馨的场景，对我和孩子来说是一种奢望。我们14年了都没有任何的消息。
Even though the technology nowadays is so advanced in the 21st century, we only have a family picture of our son when he was 2 years old. I believe that everyone in this room has a smartphone and countless photos of your family and loved ones. No matter where you are, at home, office, on the road, no matter where you are on the planet, you can always take your photos and videos of your parents, family members, children, and loved ones. This thing is normal for me and my children, but it's only an extravagant wish for me and our children. It's been 14 years.
今天我再次感谢美国政府在2009年以快速度的接受了我们孩子的庇护。但是今天我作为美国公民，我要大声的疾呼，美国公民的先例遭受到了这种惨无人寰迫害，甚至不知道死活。
Today, I would like to thank the U.S. government once again for granting refugee status to me and my children at the fastest pace in 2009. But now, as an American citizen, I want to speak out. The husband of an American citizen suffered such horrific persecution, as we don't even know if he's dead or alive. Our whole family can only be reunited in the artwork this week. Of course, it is a tragedy for our family, the United States, and the international community, which has been unable to find and protect my husband for more than 5 years.
我们全家只能以这种艺术性的形式团聚。我想除了彰显
with such a way of our reunion in a piece of art, I think the United States and the international community has a moral obligation to help and to find my husband.
美国国会曾在2006年4月27号，就是通过了一项365号决议，决议的内容就是说，释放高智晟及内容是督促中国政府恢复高智晟及高智晟律师事务所执照。我现在很想知道这种决议你们执行如何呢？
It has been 16 years since the U.S. Congress passed the resolution number 365 on April 27, 2006, urging the Chinese Communist Party to reinstate Gao Zhisheng and to restore his law firm license. How has that resolution been implemented?
对，现在已经过去了16年，我想知道就是有没有什么新的消息。
Any update progress from U.S. Congress after 16 years?
新疆的人权报告，联合国的人权事务官员呢，巴特莱斯都组团到新疆去调查维吾尔族的迫害事件。那我们美国政府的官员，就中国的政府官员，是不是也应该到美国公民的家属去交流看一些？
The author of the Xinjiang Human Rights Report by the former UN Human Rights Commission, High Commissioner of Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, can lead a team to Xinjiang to investigate the persecution of the Uyghurs. Can the U.S. Embassy, a government official in China, go to the hometown of U.S. citizen Gong He's husband, Gao Zhisheng, to look for him?
我和孩子虽然在美国的自由的国土上，可是呢，我们依然没有摆脱中共打压和迫害。我的2位亲属就是在中共的逼迫骚扰下投水自尽了。所以呢，我需要你的帮助。
Even though myself and our 2 children have been staying in the U.S. With safety, but their persecution has never stopped. Already 2 of my close relatives had committed suicide in the past few years due to this extended persecution against our family members.
请伸出您的援手，在这样的人道灾难面前，没有人可以袖手旁观。我希望在美国的国土上，不要再出现像我们的家庭这种虚拟式的团聚。我再次期待你们的帮助。愿上帝保佑美国，愿美国保佑他们公民。
Please lead a helping hand. No one can stand idly in the face of such a humanitarian disaster. I hope that such a virtual reunion will never be repeated on American soil in the future. And I look forward to your help. May God bless America. May America protect all her citizens. Thank you. I still remember in 2009, I flew to Bangkok after the next day of knowing Gong He and the 2 children back from China, witnessing a young daughter who could not bear the continuing intolerable persecution, including cut off her from schooling. She cut herself, showed her scar on her wrist, arms. And so, yes, I think we cannot sit idly anymore. Our next speaker, we're honored to have my friend, Mr. Scott Busby, who served as the acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the U.S. State Department, where in addition to the Bureau's budget and human resources, it oversees the Bureau's work on East Asia and the Pacific, Western Hemisphere, business and human rights-based sanctions. And thank you, Scott, for your years of persistent advocate and also specific efforts in helping a number of cases. So we're glad that the State Department cleared you to come over to speak for Ms. Goldstein. Welcome.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to China Aid and to Andrew and Victims of Communism Museum for inviting me to this event. It's an honor to join you, and especially to join Ms. Young today and provide remarks on the tragic 5th anniversary of Zhao Zhishang's disappearance. Gao's work representing and defending individuals from injustice despite the risks he faced is laudable, as are Ms. Young's strength and courage in continuing to advocate for her husband. Protecting and supporting human rights defenders is a key priority of U.S. foreign policy. Defenders, like Zhao Zhishang, are often harassed, detained, interrogated, imprisoned, tortured, or even killed for doing their work. The work of these brave individuals and groups is an integral part of a vibrant civil society, which in turn is crucial to developing and sustaining democracy and the rule of law. The PRC government has relentlessly harassed and threatened human rights defenders and activists of all ethnicities, nationalities, and religious backgrounds at home and abroad, and continues to do so, unfortunately. We remain deeply concerned by the broad restrictions on human rights across the PRC that result in the targeting of lawyers, journalists, activists, and members of religious and ethnic minority groups, including Uyghurs and Tibetans. The United States strongly condemns the PRC's unjust detention of lawyer Zhao Zhishang. We call on the PRC government to account for his whereabouts and cease its efforts to silence journalists, lawyers, and others like him who seek to report the truth and defend human rights and fundamental freedoms. The United States will always support brave individuals like Zhao Zhishang who seek to build a more just, stable, and prosperous society. Unfortunately, the PRC's actions in these cases are consistent with their broader crackdown against human rights activists. We continue to see harassment and intimidation of PRC nationals and other advocates advocating for human rights throughout the PRC and outside its borders. We often see similar actions against their family members in an effort to coerce these activists to stop their work. The PRC's attempts to harass, intimidate, threaten, and coerce human rights activists into silence at home, around the world, and including here in the United States, are unacceptable. We in the United States will not tolerate such actions, and we are working to counter the PRC's transnational repression tactics, including in conjunction with our own law enforcement as appropriate, to protect those targeted by the PRC. We will continue to press the PRC to cease its efforts. It is also no secret that the PRC continues to carry out genocide and crimes against humanity against Uyghurs and members of other ethnic and minority groups in Xinjiang. The PRC cannot continue to deny the mounting evidence of these crimes. Earlier this year, through the good work of Victims of Communism Memorial, we saw a significant amount of evidence in the leaked Xinjiang police files, which clearly documented the egregious abuses taking place there. And on August 31st of this year, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights released its report on the situation in Xinjiang, which reported detailed accounts of the atrocities and inhumane treatment of individuals being committed by the PRC, and they concluded that the PRC's human rights abuses, quote, may constitute crimes against humanity, close quote. The information contained in this report and the police files is not new, but this documentation further corroborates our own evidence. We welcome the report's findings as well as its recommendations, calling for the PRC to account for its egregious practices and release all individuals arbitrarily detained. Addressing these crimes remains a top priority for the department and for the U.S. government. We are committed to using all available tools, including financial sanctions and visa restrictions, to combat PRC atrocities and promote accountability for perpetrators of human rights violations and abuses. We have tightened export controls on companies implicated in human rights abuses and issued import restrictions on goods made with forced labor, consistent with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. We've also issued guidance urging U.S. businesses to seriously consider the risks that their products will be misused to enable human rights abuses. We seek to do all of these things in coordination with other like-minded governments to the extent possible. The United States will continue to support journalists, lawyers, and others like Gao Zhisheng who are brave enough to speak out against serious human rights abuses without fear of retribution. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak at this event. We appreciate the attention you're bringing to Gao Zhisheng's case. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Assistant Secretary Scott Busby. Before I introduce the next speaker, I want to recognize a few distinguished guests here. We have a few actually former Gao Zhisheng's colleagues, fellow human rights lawyers are missed. We have lawyer Chen Jiangang who's here. We have lawyer Chen Jiangang. We have lawyer Li Fangping. Yes, lawyer Li Fangping. Chen Guangzhong, of course, is a household known name. I don't want to spend too much time on human rights lawyer. I think I remember when he was under house arrest, and it was Gao Zhisheng, Li Fangping, a few other human rights lawyers moved the car close to Dongshigu village, and the car was almost flipped, and everybody was beaten up. That was a highlight of the kind of brutality of the Chinese Communist Party. And Guangzhong is now working and holding a position as a distinguished fellow at the Catholic University of America, the Center for Human Rights. Let's welcome Guangzhong.
实际上，我很想用中文传达一下我对中共的愤怒和向中国百姓传达一下我们要理解中共的邪恶。
In reality, I really want to use Chinese to really condemn denounce the Communist Party's brutality toward its own citizens.
这个耿和岛的美国的公民，他的家人被中共长期的迫害，尤其是最近这一次，已经5年零37天失踪了，没有任何的下落。那美国政府、美国各方都有义务去帮助他，担起这份责任，寻找到他。
So it is really a common responsibility for American government of every size to look for and find Gao Zhisheng after more than 5 years and 37 days of Gao Zhisheng's disappearance, reinforced disappearance.
自从2005年，我和郭飞雄在北京被绑架，中国就安排了10几辆车对高智律师进行这个围堵迫害。
Since 2005, after I was kidnapped in Beijing, and the Chinese state security arranged dozens of vehicles and surrounded and kidnapped Gao Zhisheng too.
接下来对高智晟的酷刑、关押一系列的迫害，我的案子大家都知道了。那么这些案子是典型的，让西方可以理解中国有多么邪恶的一些典型案例。
Following that, lawyer Gao Zhisheng has suffered just tremendous, constant torture, arbitrary arrest, and detention, and this all shows how evil the Chinese Communist Party is.
对，那么 从这些案子，西方民主政府没有困难去理解中国的邪恶。那么看到这邪恶以后，你们有了一个战略人权计划，去怎么解决这个问题吗？
It's a very easy task, actually, just through this case, to understand the evil nature of the Chinese Communist Party. So, we and the West, free world, have a strategy to tackle this evil.
如果我们不把民主送到中国，如果我们不把共产党推到，中国就会把专制送到美国来。 看看美国各方面的渗透，就知道了。从政府、国会到公司、民间组织，无一例外。
So if we don't send democracy and freedom to China, the Chinese Communist Party will export authoritarianism, tyranny into our society, from Congress to academics to all over our society in the free world.
这个绥靖政策解决不了专制问题，仅靠外交口水战也解决不了专制问题。我们需要有实际的行动，是吧？要不然我们要猛禽干什么？我们要这个那么多航母干什么？不要去，我觉得这些政治正确，说起来好听，没有用的。
So just so just to have like dialogue or appeasement policy won't work, and we need to have a different way. That's why, I mean, why do we have to have this Raptor or carriers, helicopters or carriers over there?
对，所以中共这个邪恶政权就是一个撒旦的代表，你没有办法和他对话，是吧？里根总统曾经说过，独裁者唯一能听懂的就是枪炮。
So the Communist Party is really a symbol of demon or satanic, and as President Reagan used to say, the only thing the communists can hear is the voice of the gun, the strength.
我想说，不要等珍珠港第二发生了，不要等导弹打到加州了，我们才赞成。
So don't wait until we hear repeat of another Pearl Harbor, or we are invaded into our homeland by the Communist Party, and then it's too late to stand up.
所以我觉得这些子弹壳呀，给我们很深的警示啊！好好的。对，所以我觉得这是非常有创意的一个，怎么说呢？
So this bullet shell.
对，我觉得
very creative.
就像本科早的说，你团聚在这个，对，你团聚在这个画像里，那我也只好借助画像拥抱一下老兄弟。感谢。
Someone said we just had a reunion and at this portrait, so I have to use this reunion to hug my good brother Cao Zhixiang.
感谢你，06年、05年考到山东。
Thank you. In 2006 and 2005, you went to Shandong to support me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonchon. Our next speaker, who actually contributed to the creation of this priceless art, to enable and help empowered Ms. Gonghe and her 2 children, working there for 2 months every day from 6 o'clock to midnight, 12 o'clock for 20 days, and with over 7,000 bullet ammo shells, one by one, made this portrait. This artist, Chen Weiming, let's welcome artist Henry Maine, who is recently wounded when he was doing another piece of sculpture.
Sorry about that. So, let me speak Chinese to be perfect. OK， 很高兴今天来到这边。前几天呢，因为我做一个香港大考场的雕塑，60年代中国的老百姓逃到香港。
So I'm glad I'm here today, and some time ago I was doing a sculpture showing the exodus of Chinese to Hong Kong when that was 1960s.
Yeah, 对，就是那个叫水路高吧，这边后来那个机器掉下来，把我这边去了
very tall
23层。
piece of sculpture, and it fell on my leg, and maybe have 23 stitches.
所以呢，其实雕塑吧，就是那个雕塑跟这个也有含义。当时中国人逃到香港，为了寻找自由，我这个雕塑的名字叫 "Swimming to Freedom"， 游向自由的香港。
Swimming to freedom. That was the name of the sculpture he is working, showing the exodus of Chinese Hong Kong.
但是因为国际社会没有真正的制止中共的独裁，现在香港人又再次逃跑。
Because the international society did not stop the Chinese Communist Party from tyranny, and now Hong Kong is entering into the tyranny again.
所以这个作品，我见证了高智晟的一家他的亲人，为了把这种破碎的记忆，用7000多个子弹壳，一天一天的给它编织起来，把这个梦编选，他们可以在这个梦里进行相会。
I witnessed how Cao Zhisheng's closest relatives, his family members, spent weeks just trying to with their broken hearts, knelt it together for this piece of art in order to have a family reunion.
当时我估计可能5000个子弹壳可以，准备了5000个子弹壳。
In the beginning, we thought 5,000 ammo shells would be sufficient.
但是远远不够。
It's not enough.
他的儿子就在这之前的准备的之后，19岁的小孩就是在沙漠的110几度的那个大雨天太阳下，去我们沙漠打枪，然后把这个子弹壳收集起来，还有那边子弹壳收集起来。
So their son, Peter Gao, basically under a 3-digit hot, humid weather in the desert, shot one by one in the desert, and then collected all these shells, and then put them together.
对，在100多个人下，做这个东西，光这个这个胶枪啊，这么大的一罐罐的胶枪，就用了10几个，买了3次。我本来以为5罐够了，5罐挣了10万，放到将近20万，你很难看出用那么多胶枪。
It used just a large amount of these liquid tapes in order to put them together.
在包装里面。
Inside the bullet.
我就看到那个耿和女士，她这个手啊，就是在一开始挤的时候还蛮有力的，她后来已经没有再力气挤了，然后用这个腿的方式挤进去，挤到这个子弹壳，然后呢这边就很多的青苔，我看她真的没力气。
I witnessed how hard Gong He was working, basically, until she basically lost her strength from her hand. Then she put the bullet here and with the tape liquid and tried to sneak in, and I saw her legs were black and blue already all over.
所以我要说的，他们的付出，他们想在这边团聚，他不仅仅是为了他们的一个家庭。其实高智晟的这个作品，这么多磁带，其实他为我们自由社会，不光是我们中国的自由社会，也为我们美国和世界的自由社会挡住了专制独裁的子弹。
So these bullets, these shells, not only just representing their families' fight for freedom, and reality, what God Zhang and his family has done is to block all the bullets that for America, for the whole free world from the Communist Party.
你们想想，美国对中国的绥靖政治30年的友好，换来了什么？换来了中共对美国憎恨，而对世界民主社会的全方位的渗透。
What have we got in the West after 30 years of appeasement to the Chinese Communist Party? It's more tyranny, more authoritarianism, and more penetration into our society.
像中共政府对乌克兰他们的支持，把航空母舰第一艘航空母舰就是中国卖给他们，而且所有的高科技的军事科技卖给了乌克兰，支持乌克兰，至少提高了他们20年的军事水准。但是，你看，中共跟俄国他们是背靠背、上不封顶的联盟，来侵略乌克兰，侵略自由世界。
And you saw how the Chinese Communist Party actually, in the past, tried to ship arms and support Ukraine, but now they actually became like little close brothers with Russia together to invade Ukraine.
所以我现在非常想呼吁美国的那些商人。那些大公司，他们还在跟中共做生意。他们这样，如果他们的家庭有一个孩子被失踪，像高智晟一样被失踪，像王炳章被无期徒刑，他们会作何感想？他们还会跟中共做生意吗？
So I want to ask those big corporations who continue to do business with the Communist Party in China, like if your children, their children, daughters, sons are missing, kidnapped, arbitrarily arrested, like Gao Zhisheng, like Dr. Wang Binggang, would you continue to do business as usual?
所以，我们都是human，我们都是人，所以我们将心比心。 像马斯克现在还把最大的生意在中国做，他们是对世界有益呢，对自由有益呢，还是有害？我们现在已经非常明确的答案：中共对乌克兰对中共的支持，美国对中共的支持，我们新西兰当时对中共的支持。现在换来的是什么？他们在建立在新西兰的所有的政党，不管你是执政党还是在野党，都有了他们国会议员的代表。
As a New Zealand citizen, and I also witnessed how the New Zealand politicians had appeased the Chinese Communist Party for so long, and what have we got? Now, even in every party in New Zealand Parliament, there are Chinese Communist Party representatives, the interest representatives.
好，所以我真的呼吁大家，关治高智晟，释放高智晟是美国的义务，并不是仅仅是为了高智晟这个整个的家庭，也是我们自由世界的安全，为了我们美国人。谢谢大家。
So I want to call upon the free world that to care and help Gao Zhisheng look for and ask and find Gao Zhisheng is not only responsibility of his own families and our friends, it is really the responsibility of our free world, and it's really for our own security and prosperity sake. we should do this. Thank you.
Thank you. 然后我最后讲，如果美国的那些大公司继续跟中共做生意，养肥的不仅仅是中国的独裁政权，最后养虎为患，牺牲是美国人民的利益，是自由的价值观。谢谢大家。
Thank you. So we continue with this pattern on appeasing the Communist Party. Then we, in the end, will harm ourselves in the free society. Thank you, Congressman. Our next speaker is Congressman Frank Bull, and he is certainly a true friend to the Chinese people. Has been serving Congress for several decades, represented Virginia's 10th congressional district, and has single-handedly helped create the Office of International Religious Freedom and the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And Congressman Wolf was also used to serve as the co-chair of the Continental Human Rights Commission, and right now he is a member of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Let's welcome Congressman Wolf.
Well, thank you, Bob. And I want to thank Bob for putting this event on, and I also want to thank Dr. Grunberg for having this. It's a great. There are more. We tell people about this facility, so when they come to Washington. I also want to thank Secretary Busby, who's left, and his staff and others that took the time to come. He's got a lot of going on. The very fact that he came is very, very, very important. I was thinking that we were really with people, listening to some of the people speaking, we were really with people like Sakharov. We were with Solzhenitsyn. We were with Sharansky. I mean, these are the Sharanskys and the Solzhenitsyns and the Sakharovs of China. And I am very grateful for those of you who were willing to speak out, and many of you who paid a tremendous price to kind of speak out. And I personally believe that the Chinese Communist Party government will fall. I think it will fall the same way that the Ceausescu government fell, and it will fall. And I do believe maybe it will fall in our lifetime. This is the 5th anniversary of Gao's disappearance. We still have no answer from China. The question is, how long will it take for China to reveal what they did to one of the most respected human rights lawyers in China? Gao was known for being a fierce defender of activists and religious minorities. He took on numerous high-profile human rights cases involving Christians, Falun Gong, and farmers. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize several times for his significant work in helping the innocent. As a result, he faced imprisonment, torture, illegal house arrest, and detention before his incarceration in December 2011. Since 2017, no one has made any contact with him. 5 years of silence. I wonder what happened to this brave man. It reminds me of Congressman Crispin to a Holy Communion from the bishop. The bishop didn't take it away and never seen again. During my time in Congress, I adopted Gao to the Defending Freedom's prospect as a prisoner of conscience. I'm asking the Chinese government, there must be someone here, because they usually slip somebody into every meeting they tell here in Washington, to tell us where this courageous man is, where he is. They must also allow his wife to communicate with him. How can China expect to be respected by the nations of the world if it continues to make people like Gao disappear? Today, China is persecuting every faith, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, Tibetan Buddhists, Uyghur Muslims, and Falun Gong. And we know about the recent report that was said with regard to the Uyghur Muslims and the high-tech surveillance. As this gentleman said something about companies involved in all the concentration camps and the detention camps in China today. We were at the one event that you had. There was one Christian fellow that said there were cameras throughout the entire camps. And know who made those cameras? Hikvision. Hikvision made those cameras. And Hikvision has a lobbyist here in town. Hikvision has 2 former members of Congress that represent them. Shameful! He is actually right. No one should represent any company or any organization that's cooperating in doing what they do with regard to the Chinese government. Religious freedom in China is atrocious, and the faith of those like Gao who are willing to stand up for the beliefs are to be honored for their courage. I would urge all the American businesses doing business in China to speak out on behalf of Gao. I would urge the American embassy in Beijing to speak out for Gao. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. All who consider themselves friends of those being persecuted should be speaking out on their behalf. Dan Hay, I applaud you for your faith, for your resilience to keep fighting for your husband. No one should have to endure what you have because the Chinese government, besides your husband's work, is a threat to their agenda, restricting the freedom of practice of religion. Gao's faith is an inspiration, and his work will not be forgotten. Though his voice may be silenced, his bravery and boldness are a model for all. We need to find out what happened, and we need to have people go to China and ask, I believe he still may very well be alive, and it's important that we do everything we possibly can to find out. And if you know anybody of these big lobby firms in the city that are working for the Chinese and aiding and abetting this, you should speak out. Many of them are good people. Maybe you may not know how bad they're doing. What they're doing is immoral and wrong. We should do everything we can to reunite and find out what's so happening with them. Bob, thank you. Thank
So now, Ambassador, you remember to...
Yes, thank you, Congressman Wolf, for important remarks. It's my pleasure to introduce Congressman Chris Smith, who is currently serving his 21st term in the U.S. House of Representatives and serves residents of the 4th Congressional District of New Jersey. He is a senior member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, and ranking member of the bipartisan House Congressional Executive Commission on China. He was also the founding co-chair of the Victims of Communism Caucus. It has been a consistent and dedicated advocate fighting for religious freedom and rule of law in China. Congressman Chris Smith, thank you.
Thanks for the great work that you are doing in this never-ending fight against tyranny, against the Chinese Communist Party, as well as globally, the fight against these ongoing communist dictatorships that continue unabated in their torture and their mistreatment of people. It's good to see Bob Food and Cheng Wen-jen, and dear wife, Jacob. It's great to see you both. Thank you for your leadership. And just let me say a couple of words, if I could. Frank Wolf, you got to know this, just about 40 minutes ago, we passed a reauthorization of the USERF, the China Commission, and that and the entire effort at the U.S. Department of State to combat religious persecution and to promote religious freedom was authored by the champion who is sitting right there, Congressman Frank Wolf. Frank, thank you so much for that work. And in a small sense or a gesture, because he will continue, I think, making great strides for religious freedom. Frank is actually a commissioner on the very commission he established. But it was just reauthorized by the House, and we'll go down and we'll be signing the law. So, Frank, thank you for that leadership. No, for religious freedom.
I gotta say,
No
one has done that. No one has done more for human rights and religious freedom in the entire Congress, in the history of the Congress, than Congressman Chris Smith. No one.
Let me just a couple of comments, if I could. And let me just say about Bob Fu. You know, Bob, both Frank and I have been, and especially to me, a mentor on what to do, when to do it, how to do it. When Frank and I were protesting the 2008 Olympics, we went prior to the Olympic Games, And we were saying, what is everybody worried about? What venue you're going to? They're rounding up dissidents, putting them in prison so the journalists could not speak to them. And we were talking, Bob flew on the phone from the embassy van and talked about how we were going to unfurl a banner, you remember, that said, you know, human rights at Tiananmen Square. And within about 20 minutes, we're in a secure embassy van, the embassy got a phone call and said, if they unfurl that banner, they will be escorted to the airport and thrown out of the country. So they certainly had their eye on you for the great work you've done, Bob. Thank you so much. You know, over a decade ago, on February 12th, 2012, I convened a hearing, a congressional hearing before the China Commission on the case of Gao Zhejiang, and it featured testimony by his wife, Go. And thank you, it was very eloquent. I have a copy of the hearing if you want to look at it. But I'll never forget how she spoke about the unspeakable tortures that her husband was experiencing over time, multiple arrests, blowing smoke in his eyes. I won't even describe some of the others, you all know it. Unspeakable tortures, and yet his will and his determination was strong, but she, as a loving wife, was hurting beyond words and asking for his release. The very day she testified, President Obama and Vice President Biden were meeting with Vice President Xi Jinping, and she had asked repeatedly to meet with the President and the Vice President of the United States of America before that meeting to lay out the case for her husband and to say, please, raise the case, secure his release. They never even responded to that request. No reply whatsoever, which is appalling in my opinion. A few years later, 1 year later, I had Grace testify at what we called the Five Daughters hearing. And we had 5 daughters of prominent human rights activists in China who gave incredibly riveting testimony about their dads. I remember Grace talking about how when she would go to school, she would have 6 to 7 policemen in her car taking her to school, mocking her father unceasingly. And we all know it's not just the dissident, the human rights activist who's in prison who suffers, it's the entire family. And that's what she suffered and told us about this at the hearing and many, many other things. I took the hearing, went to the White House, and said, Mr. President, this is Obama again, will you please meet with the 5 daughters? Because at the hearing, the daughters said, including Grace, you know, President Obama has 2 daughters, he'll understand, and he'll really embrace this because he'll speak as a father of 2 daughters to Xi Jinping and to other communist leaders on behalf of Gao. And I tried 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, about the entire year, calling down there, talking to the chief of staff and many others, and they said, finally, after about a year, they just don't have the time. And that is emblematic of what we have faced, and Frank knows that we have tried so hard with State Departments to get them to realize how important human rights and religious freedom in particular is in China and everywhere else, but in China. So many people pay lip service and do very little to try to change it. Frank and I led the effort to link human rights to most favored nation status. I'll never forget, it was Bill Clinton who said famously that George Herbert Walker Bush was coddling dictatorship because he was not really standing up in the way many of us think he should have done. So in comes Clinton, does an executive order that said we're linking human rights with trade, and I gave one statement after another, as did Frank on the floor at press conferences, thanking Bill Clinton for that. But then in an infamous gesture, on May 26, 1994, and you can watch it, I did a C-SPAN press conference that night, because on a Friday afternoon, when most people left Congress to go back to their districts, I left after the press conference, he delinked human rights and trade. And that's when we lost China. That's when they took a look at us and said, these people just care about profits and not about human rights. So we've got to reclaim that territory. And I have a bill in now that would reestablish the linkage between MFN and human rights. It's a very, very hard way to get that passed. I'm going to try. Tom Swazi from New York is our chief co-sponsor. But we've got to do so much more. And speaking out on behalf of Gao Zhizhen now couldn't be more important. You know, after all these years of suffering, of disappearing, as they say, it is absolutely time that the White House, the State Department, you know, we have these long conversations with Xi Jinping going on with President Biden. We'll bring up the dissidents and say this is very important to us. And if he does that, I do believe Gao can be free. You know, Chen Guangzhen, everyone thought that there's no way he was going to get out of prison. And Bob Fu played such an instrumental intercession on that as well. When we got him on the phone in one of our hearings. And there we are in a hearing, talking to this man who had suffered so much for human rights, because of his lawsuits and what he had done, particularly in the area of protecting women from the outrageous forced abortion policy in China. And Bob got him on the phone, and we're talking to him, and he says, I want to come to the United States. About 6 to 7 hours later, it was after our 4th hearing, China relented and let him out, and now he is thankfully, and his wife and family, free in this country. So I bring all this up because we've got to redouble, triple our efforts, and again, Ambassador Bremer and Bob, it's so important. Individuals do matter. Their suffering matters. What happens to their family matters. And so we've got to do so much more. You know, it's interesting that Xi Jinping is not going to be at the UN for the meeting of leaders. He is going for his 3rd term as the General Secretary. Our hope is that he loses because he certainly has, you know, look what he's done to the Uyghurs. You know, we all know it. He's committing genocide in real time, right before everybody's eyes. And of course, too many people in the West, including in this country, do a little lip service and then turn into business as usual. So we've got to do much more in that area. You know, I do think that Xi Jinping is losing a lot of ground. You know, the way he's done his zero COVID policy in Shanghai, because that's where some of his opposition certainly comes from, is you know, hurting him. So maybe, hopefully, we get, I'm not going to say a reformer, that's hoping too much, but someone who will be less egregious in terms of their behavior, so we can begin working hard to protect individuals. You know, I do hope and pray, and I think the prayer is as important as anything, maybe more so, undergirds everything we do, for the freedom and the liberty of the people of China. The people of China are great. They don't have a government that is commensurate with that greatness, not even close. And so we need to pray for that as well. And when the time comes, and it will come, no dictatorship need be forever, no injustice need be forever. When Gao is free, when other of these very, very brave women and men are free, they will be the heroes like Chen that everyone looks back on and says, China is free because of them. We play a supportive role to the best of our abilities, but we've got to play that role. You know, what's happened to the Falun Gong, what's happened to so many people, it's just unspeakable. With the civilization of religious freedom by the Chinese dictatorship. We had a hearing just a couple weeks ago, months ago. I chaired it on the organ harvesting, and I myself, even though I've had previous hearings, read about it all the time, raise my voice. We learned that 50 to 100,000 people every year, disproportionately Falun Gong practitioners and others, are brought in and they have their organs removed, 2 to 3 per person. That is absolutely barbaric. That's Joseph Mengele-like. That's Nazi-like. And so we have a bill in. I tried to get it up for a vote this week in committee. Failed. Didn't get up for a vote that would hold people in that chain of supply chain, if you will, to account for that atrocity. So we've got to step up, call on the White House, hope springs eternal. Biden has not done it yet, but maybe he will. He didn't do it when he wouldn't meet with you, and I thought that was one of the worst things ever. There they are, it would have been so, you know, those kinds of interventions produce results. So thank you for all of you do. I look around and it's like I'm talking to the who's who of the movement of protection for human rights. So thank you for all of that great work.
that honor that was not mentioned was actually Congressman Smith, was one of the congressional members who was sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party for his years of work. Thank you so much. Our next speaker I want to introduce is Professor Nie Sen. Professor Nie is a professor at Catholic University of America who has been serving the chairman of the Department of Mechanical Engineering. He has also been a champion for human rights and religious freedom. Thank you, Professor Nie.
Thank you. And the
Well, it was a great honor to speak after all these great leaders. Respectful, Busby, and Scott Busby, and also respect the human rights leader. About how great is Attorney Dawson and how terrible is the human rights situation in China, I can't disagree with that at all. Here, I just want to add two more points about Attorney Dawson as a personal friend of Dawson and daughter. Dawson is the bravest lawyer I know of, okay, in China, who defend the poor and disadvantaged persons and families for years. At the beginning of the 2000s, the persecution of Falun Gong was very serious. No one failed to stand up to speak for them. Okay, tens of millions of Falun Gong was tortured and murdered. Dawson was the first attorney to step up and take the case, investigate the case, okay, defend the rights. He wrote three famous open letters to the leader of communists, Hu Jintao, Hu Jiabao, 3 times. And later in 2005, and later on in 2009, he wrote another famous letter in Chinese, it's a hateful Tao. That was the case. Then that probably is the case got him into trouble, what you heard about, closest law firms and others. And he spent times ever trying to convince the communist leaders not to do that for communist people, for Chinese people, including Falun Gong practitioners. Apparently, communists didn't listen to that. Okay. The persecution of Falun Gong is continued for 20, 30 years right now. Just bring out very briefly, take an example of the last 2 months, July and August. There are more than 1,800 people being kidnapped, harassed, okay, and jailed. And among that, more than 600 homes being illegally ransacked and raided. And more than 60 people sent to the psychiatric education camp. And 18 people were tortured to death. That was just for the last 2 months. Okay, it still is ongoing, and which Attorney Dawson stand up and speak for us. We are very grateful for his courage on that. Another point I want to add is at the end of the year 2005, December 31st, Attorney Dawson and his wife and her, who know about all this deceptions and brutal and evilness of the communists, and they stand up in public, use real name to quit the party, quit the organization, the membership of the Communist Party. Dawson even say that on that day, that is the most proud and happiest day in his life, quit the party. And with his inspirations and many others role models, and with more and more Chinese understand the truth with free information flow. It's every day there are many, many courageous Chinese who stroll from communist organizations. In the past 17 years,
it accumulates to 402 million courageous Chinese who cut time from the Communist Party and organizations, which is larger than our population in our country. So, take yesterday as an example, there was more than 50,000 people, write statements on the websites and denounce their relationship with evil communists. It's more than one person who stroll every 2 seconds. That is very courageous. That we also owe the thanks to Attorney Goldstein and many other leaders. We are here to ask for immediate release of Attorney Goldstein and help him to seek medical care. And at the minimum, at least tell the whole world that where is he? Let him to stand up in public to prove that he's life. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In conclusion, Conscience of China, lawyer Gao Zhisheng, has been missing for over 5 years. I remember before he was missing again 5 years ago, I had a number of conversations with Gao Zhisheng, chatting for different ways. We just had a lot of conversations together. I realized actually Gao Zhisheng is not only a bold human rights lawyer, a loving husband and father, he's also really a man of faith that not so many had reported. The way he told me he met with God, basically a real encounter with God, happened not in a church. Actually, some even house churches refused to accept him because he was so dangerous as a liability when he tried to be baptized. That's a shame to the house churches. But he actually met with God in the most horrible torture time. This is what he told me. He said, one time when he was being put naked in a torture chamber with several interrogators, used electric shock batons, basically torture him everywhere, anywhere in his body. He said, that's the first time he prayed to God. He said, God, help me. God, protect me. And all of a sudden, he said, miraculously, he could smell the burning skin, but at the same time, almost a supernatural shield, totally clothed. I mean, his body, and he said he felt so peaceful that he fell asleep and started snoring on the ground. Snoring. No pain. He said he didn't feel any pain at all during that moment. To the point, those several interrogators were so angry at him, kicked him and pour water and wake him up. I said, we were like wet with sweat with electric shock batons, and you need to confess and sign this. You were laughing in ours by snoring. You know what Gao Zhisheng said? He said, because the one that lives in me is much powerful, more powerful, and bigger than you. I don't think he had read that part of the scripture. If you read, as pastor, I can read to you that exactly in the gospel, in the 1 John, in the New Testament. 1 John chapter 4, verse 4. 中文是约翰一书4章4节，高志胜就是在一个神奇的状态，他就引用了这些经文。他说：“小子们啊，你们是属上帝的，并且胜了他们。 那的你们里面的比那的世界上更大。1 John 4:4. Little children, you are from God, and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. I think as Congressman Speed just mentioned, a man of faith should be a man of prayer. I'm sure wherever Dr. Sean is being held, God forbid, I think I still by faith believe he's still alive. He is a praying lawyer, a praying warrior for religious freedom and human rights. I think first, we at minimum should pray for him, pray for freedom in China, pray for all the suffering, the persecuted in China, and then take prayerful actions. As the scripture said, faith without action is a dead faith. So each one can do something. Member of Congress, Congressman Smith, passed legislation, resolutions, netizens, journalists, we can write a post on our social media every day. Just number, like today is 5 years, 37 days. I'm sure Wang Chong every day is counting the clock. Can't we think about that? Of course, in our community, in our Bible study group, in our temples, in our synagogues, we can always share a few things, a few members, like Dr. Sean. I think gradually, little by little, we can wake up a crowd. More Chinese can be waken up and stand up to the Communist Party's dictatorship. I think in the end, what he said, he who is in you is greater than he who is in the whole world. No matter Communist Party, nuclear power, Xi Jinping, in the eyes of God, he can just smash them at a moment when he wills. Thank you very much. God bless you, everyone. I think today we have a special treat, right? Thank you, Christina, for arranging the June 4th Memorial Tour, right? So we have a special tour right next door. And when after we finish the press conference, every one of you are welcome to just go through that door, and we can do a tour. And we have a special treat. One of the Tiananmen Square students leader, Mr. Zhou Fengxue, yes, on the back. One of 21 most wanted, still active, fortunately, and he will be an eyewitness and living testimony to give us a guided tour. It's free. That's wonderful. I also want to thank Christina, and she has been such a great co-worker and co-laborer together for freedom. Once again, thank you, Professor Brummer.